Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I guess the invite was sent out, and then I guess I was meant to have hosts with me today. So I was meant to have my fellow engineers back in Hargeisa. Unfortunately, some things have come up. I guess death in certain people's families, and also travel, and then being in other projects. So yes, I'm a female engineer. So currently, I think we're going to be talking about the barriers to communication and construction. I guess my main aspect of this is to show that engineering in the UK and also engineering in Africa, we face the same challenges in general. I guess as engineers, we're here to solve problems, and wherever we are in the world, if you're in a third world country or in a developed world. So if you don't mind, on to the next slide. So just a quick agenda, I guess. As before, as I said, I was meant to have two individuals. I was meant to be the host. With the current two individuals, we were meant to go through certain topics. So I just literally just throwed a few bullet points ahead, which I'll be talking about my experience. So I'm going to talk about work experience myself, and then the location of the project, and then Hargeisa bypass, different ministries that were involved, community consents, and my current role, which I actually took place, and then Q&A towards the end. The current agenda will be a bit ad hoc. So if you just towards the end, just please ask me any Q&As, and then we'll go forward from that. Next slide, please. So a bit about myself. My name's Ikram Hamid, obviously born and raised in Tottenham. Quite passionate about that, I think, in general, when I move in the UK. So Tottenham is quite a passionate part of me. As you can see, a lot of gentrification and also a lot of development in Tottenham, so I'm really happy about that. Graduated civil engineering in 2015 with a first class. My specialising in that was hydraulics, and then I went to study a master's in structural design and construction management during COVID. I worked on many projects, which I'll be going into that. Bit of a Man United fan, so if there's any Arsenal fans, please drop out. But in general, I don't really follow football that much, but once upon a time I did. I try and do a bit of boxing if I can. I love doing volunteering, and I have a beautiful, inspiring daughter who's 9 years old, so I hope she also enters the engineering field. Next slide. So a bit of my experience in the UK. So when I graduated, whilst I was in uni, I actually had the opportunity, unlike most engineers in the UK, I actually had the opportunity to do some work experience whilst I was studying. So I worked on a project which is called the West Village in Notting Hill Gate, which was a residential building. And then it was literally a small little car park, actually, that got sold to a Canadian company, which actually invest their pensions in infrastructure around the world. So that's quite interesting about Canadians, which I wasn't aware about that. But for example, the houses were getting sold before they were even built for like 9 mil, and I think they bought the land off the bank for like £8 million. So there was like 4 different, so it was quite interesting. So whilst I was in uni, I was like, residential is not my cup of tea, because it just looked like one block, and then you literally do the same repetition over and over again. So I was interesting. I worked with a site engineer who was like, if you are a first class student, how comes you can't do simple surveying? So that was interesting. So I left residential in general, my passion in that. And then I went to a multi-billion project in the UK, which is a sewage project in London. I guess if you guys all Google it, it's like a £5 billion project. So for my dissertation, for my bachelor's, I actually had a passion in hydraulics. Unfortunately, I wasn't aware of the different layers within companies. So you have a contractor, and then you have a design consultancy, and then you have the client. At first, I was a bit unhappy because I really wanted to do hydraulic modeling. And then when I joined the client side in the beginning of my graduate program, I joined a company called CH2M Hill. And then on that side, well, who got bought up by Jacobs now, so there's no longer CH2M Hill. But yeah, I joined as on a graduate program as a client rather than working for a contractor and a designer. So passion for me when it comes to design left me in my 2 years. So my 2 years were literally a great foundation in, I would say, contract administration, learning the NECFE contract, dealing with clients, managing the contractor, and understanding risks and projects from a high level aspects rather than going into detail. And then I left Tideway and Jacobs, and then I joined the company Atkins, who now have been bought up by S&C Leveling. So that was more of a design role. So obviously my passion when I was a graduate was to get chartered. So I knew that I had a lot of gap in my CV because I didn't do ultimately design. So I was like, now I need to join a design consultancy. So I joined Atkins, and I was happy to work on my first marine project, which was Dover Western Docks, a bit of highways, utilities, etc. And then jumped onto Heathrow expansion, which you can see in the bottom in the middle. Currently, that project is no longer going on due to political reasons in the UK. Hopefully it'll come back online because it created a lot of jobs. And then, so that was also with utilities design as well, doing utilities design. And then I jumped into Heathrow Security with the same company, which was Heathrow Security. And that was quite interesting because on that project, I worked on many different types of terminals. I worked on Terminal 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then it was looking at different things that I wouldn't think about a project, but it was actually before feasibility. So it was like a business, it was like creating the business case for that. And collecting all the information that was needed to send back to the client to say that these are your problems that you need to solve, and this is the design that you might need to put in. So that was quite interesting to do that. Work installed to help some of the biometrics on Terminal 4, I think. So that was interesting. So it was a different aspects, worked with a lot of software engineers, modelers, the amount of luggage, the amount of things that happen at an airport that you wouldn't actually consider, because as a customer, you don't really consider. So in the top middle, you can see a picture there. So that was designing the different biometrics. So when you're going through security, you usually put your hands up. Now, if you realize you don't need to put your hands up now at certain terminals, you actually just can put your hands beside yourself. So that was dealing with a lot. That was quite interesting as well. So there's different modeling systems. So that was interesting. And then, so that was aviation. So I spoke a bit of sewage. So residential, sewage, marine, and aviation. And then I actually had the opportunity with Atkins again to work in nuclear. So that was on a Wilfar project. So I worked in nuclear. So I was lucky to work on that kind of projects. I've never worked in nuclear. That's when my risk management and program, my skills advanced even more. And then Thames Water, which I don't advise anyone to work on a sewage treatment plant because it really smells. And then your nostrils just become so used to being on site that sewage just becomes a normal smell for you. Worked a bit on London City Airport, so aviation again. And then lastly but not least, during COVID, I worked on Crossrail. So Crossrail was the last project that I worked in the UK before I went up to Hargeisa. I'm currently in London, by the way. So if we can go to the next slide. So my current role is working on HS2 for contractor, which is EKFB. My current role, I just do design, consent, stakeholder management, reviewing contracts, NEC3, people management is such a big thing, guys, like emotional intelligence and stuff, and project control. So there's a lot of change management and a lot of change on projects. So yeah, next slide. So this is a little bit of photos that I just thought to share, which I'll carry on introducing Hargeisa bypass. Next slide, please. So Hargeisa bypass, before I jump into the project, I just thought to give you a bit of, is it a geography lesson? Which I was quite surprised in. So this region that I'm working in is Somaliland. Just a disclaimer, the individuals that I invited earlier on were also worked in Somaliland as well. Obviously, I'm just an engineer, don't really want to get into the politics. So as engineers, let's just look at the current region, and we don't really need to say what part is what and what belongs to Somaliland and what doesn't. That's not really my thing to talk about, because I'm a civil engineer. So we've got Odal, which everyone, so that we've got Odal there. If people know about Salah, if everyone knows about Boromir, and then we've also got the Sahel region, and then we've got Morodi Cheh, which is basically Hargeisa, Togrer, which is basically Bur'o, Buhose, and then we've got the Sol region, which is basically Las Anod, Ainaba, and then Senag, which is basically Erigabo and other cities. So I was actually working in Morodi Cheh region, which is Hargeisa. I just wanted to literally just show this kind of image, is to show you how Ethiopia, and actually Eritrea is not landlocked, but Ethiopia is landlocked. And Allah has given opportunity for Somalia and Somaliland not to be landlocked, and then also Djibouti. So I guess a lot of people don't really understand the benefits that is, but hence why the road that I'm going to be talking about is actually to benefit Ethiopia rather than to. It will also benefit Somaliland, but the main part is to actually benefit Ethiopia. So next slide, please. So a different image that I just thought to show about Hargeisa bypass. So if you can see towards the top hand corner, so we've got that's where currently Somaliland is, and there's where Ethiopia is. So the project is literally trying to get where you can see Berbera port on the bottom is literally, so Berbera port obviously has been built now. And now logistically, the road that I was working on was a 22-kilometer road within Hargeisa. There's other roads and other parts that are getting built at the moment, but it's literally to get from Berbera port to Addis Ababa. So how do we get Ethiopia's goods from importing it into the region? So I just thought to give a high level on that. Next slide. No, sorry, if you go to the previous slide, I do apologize. Just a bit of statistics just for yourself. So Hargeisa is like, I would say the population would be 1 million. I would, don't quote me on this, but I'll just say like this, the population of Somaliland will be like 4 million as well. This project has created a lot of jobs for everyone and training, which I'll go in more depth into after. So it's literally, this project was funded by the United Kingdom, which was DFID, but now is basically FCDO, which is the Foreign Commonwealth Development. And then we had a design consultancy, a project management consultant, which are called Trademark. So they were based in Kenya. And then we had a design consultant that was from Uganda. And then the design consultant was from Uganda, and then the contractor was Chinese, which they were called COCCC. And then I was employed by the main contractor, who was COCCC. And then the whole management was by the Ministry Transport and Road Development, which is in Somalia, is called Wasarada Gaydidka. So currently Hargeisa bypass is basically a 2 lanes single carriageway along the Berbera corridor to Somaliland capital. it's basically from the points which is from Halea to some people that know the region quite well. It's up to basically the end of the 22 kilometers is when you're going towards the control towards Gabile. So I had you can just imagine as a working in a farm location outside of Hargeisa. You can imagine you need to get a site complex, you need to get a site, you need to get water, you need to do telecommunication. Is literally, if everyone just Googles NASA Hubbard, that's how it literally looked like. So it was a lot of things that had to be done, which I never thought about you had to put into a contract. And then the next slide. So this is myself and a female nurse actually, who was actually on site because there's no doctors anywhere near. So if there was any potential injuries or something, she would be the first point of call. She was also trained by certain medics as well. So she had quite a lot of training. So that was so me and her actually giving the scissors to the president of Somaliland and the British ambassador to Somaliland from the UK. Next slide. So I just thought to put 2 random images and then explain myself explain what these current 2 images are. The picture towards the left would be a random day for me on site, which would literally be every day go onto site and speaking to the local Somali I don't know if is everyone on here can everyone understand Somali or
I'd hope so, yeah.
Yeah, so waxay ahayd dadka magaalada jooga oo xaafada deegaanka, so we would have the caaqilka magaalada, xaafada, and then we would say how's the a normal stakeholder engagement. So when you're in the UK and you're doing stakeholder engagement, you would send out papers, or you send out you would have postcodes of certain houses, and then you'd also go to the community leader and also give them out. But in this area we actually had to create a lot of close communication with the residents in the area. If we wanted to dump soil in the area, if basically what else, if they wanted the mud that if they wanted it, then we would have to say to them, can we dump it, and then sign some sort of consent. Currently on this day we were actually looking for an area where we can dump the actual extra soil that was coming from the road, and then we had so many different chief leaders in every area, and they all had their own benefits that they wanted as well. We couldn't go directly through the government, so we had to create a good engagement with the community. And then towards the right was different fire extinguishers. Obviously, there's certain things that you would take for granted when you're actually working on a site or working in the UK, that you would assume everywhere you go, people know standard training on fire extinguishers. But this project actually gave benefit to teach everyone on the site. And then we actually had to do a bit of training on how to show them how to use fire extinguishers. And then there's only certain individuals that know how to use it. But it was interesting to see that simple health and safety standards or things that you see in the UK are not really implemented when you go abroad. Next slide. This is a normal vehicles that you can drive within the project. So as you can see, is also local residents also have an agreement. I guess even on the project that I'm working on the UK as well, don't really need to mention which one, but the alignment on the road sometimes also can differ. So when you're actually seeing a design and you're actually going onto site, sometimes the design coordinates are not always what you see on site. So we're just discussing with landowners in that area, them assuming, and we're just making sure that the communication channel is correct, where the alignment where we're aware and that they're aware that we don't pass beyond the alignment of the road, and landowners know their road. Even you assume that they, you assume Somali people, you know, coordinates your Hasma Fahmiyan, but when it comes to Bolord and lining, they don't need a ministry or land map. They got everything. They know with their eyes where everything is. So that was quite interesting, always making sure that we keep within the road alignment. And if we need any extra land, we always agree with consent. Next slide. This is me, a born and raised girl, literally going to Africa. And what I couldn't find other pictures, but one of the things that I wanted to highlight when we was working on this project is camels just passing us past. So you've got literally excavators. It's the morning, we start 7 o'clock morning shift in the morning. Then you've got camels, you've got monkeys, you've got what else? You've literally got sheep, and they're just literally passing along. You've got turtles. So we've got war dogs, so like a wild pigs as well. So whilst you're working on a construction site and you've dealt with the community, you had great engagement with them, but things and risks, you can't change a camel on the route that the camel goes, so you always have to consider the camel. But that was something that was quite interesting as well, and that's myself, by the way, but that's not in Hargeisa, that's in a different region. But that's me trying to get a little. Next slide. So we've got a picture on the left. This is how things look like in a construction site. So what I wanted to highlight, we've got 2 Chinese workers. You're literally, if everyone can see the different types of PPE, we've got a guy towards the left-hand corner, if everyone can see, with a blue shirt. He's got the right boots, so that's a good start. Everyone would be given a set of PPE as well. So another thing that's granted, that people take for granted in the UK, it's the employer's responsibility to give you the PPE. In Somaliland, or the projects that I've worked on, this project was a mega big project worldwide. So this was there was no excuses for laborers not to wear PPE. But health and safety in China and health and safety in Africa and health and safety in the UK, I just wanted to highlight the difference. You can see, so it was, I don't know how hot it was, but it was literally, I would say it was like 38 degrees, even hotter than that. Maybe I'm exaggerating because I'm from the UK, but we would have siestas. So we would have a nap between 12 and 1, and then we would work from 7 in the morning all the way to 6 in the evening. For me, the first month or so, I would get quite dehydrated. It was quite hot. It was really hard, I guess, for some of the workers that were from Ethiopia, Tanzania, Somaliland, Somalia. It was normal for them to work in this kind of conditions. But for me, I wouldn't mind working in snow. But what language do you think that was used on site? Just a question for anyone in the audience, just a question. What language do you think was the common language for everyone to understand?
Probably English.
Yeah, so there was not an actual A language that was common on site. It was every language you can think of. So towards the right, we have the community chiefs that are on the left-hand corner, but then you've got myself in a black hijab, and then you've got the Chinese female who's a lead on the project. So she spoke English and Chinese. I spoke broken Somali and English. Well, now I speak Somali. And then we've got this chap who's a site engineer with the rat hat. Can everyone see the guy in the red hat? So he spoke English, Chinese, and Somali. So I think that was quite amazing. And then we've got this other chap that speaks Swahili. So there were so many different languages on this project. So on the site, it would just be yelling and screaming, but you have to get the job done. So the guys that are wearing the helmets and the guys that are wearing the sun hats, they're the Chinese, they don't understand it. They only understand each other through physical, they only understand each other by sign language. So that was in the beginning, it was really hard to understand different cultures and different ethics. So when it comes to Chinese and they're working on a construction project, there's no such thing as delay on projects. They are all oriented about time. They will literally push you to you actually work. Whereas in the UK, projects are different completely. They're completely different structured. So yeah, that would be the right hand side of the picture. I just wanted to show an image of how a normal meeting will be with the mayor of the area and the construction workers. So that was just an image I wanted to share. And then what languages, the amount of languages that were shared on the project. Next slide. So the different types of ministries that were involved. So it was the Ministry of Finance, Maliyada, the Ministry of Public Works, which, and then you've got the Ministry of Transport, which is basically Wasaaradda Gaadiidka, but then the Ministry of Transport splits up into many different types of ministries. This is the ministry that was basically, the highway project was in their hands. So the Ministry of Transport basically has a different department, which is called the Road Development Agency. And then they've got their own lead of the Road Development Agency. But then the president of Somaliland actually had 5 engineers that literally, which is called the pavement unit, and they were literally, they came up with the different, they had to actually manage the whole project and check everything was on to scratch. So they would report back to the president. And then you've also got the Ministry of Works, which is the ministry Wasaaradda Shaqada iyo Shaqalaha, and then Wasaaradda Caafimaadka, because obviously remember guys, it was COVID and it was like obviously everyone's currently on site. And then I actually even took my COVID test. I actually took my COVID injection on that project. And then the Ministry of Environment. So everything. So things that were taken on site, for example, so on engine oils, we had to consider where we're going to spill the engine oils. The current site complex, you know, recycling, we had to do that on recycling as well. I was surprised that I was doing recycling on a project in Africa, to be honest, but that was quite amazing. We had a graveyard next to us, so we had to consider the graveyard. I think some people, we've done a bit of community engagement on the graveyard as well, to like clear up the graveyard. There was no water. I think the well was like 200 meters or something. I had to get clean water. Telecommunication companies had to come in and install antennas for us to actually get internet as well and electricity just for the site to run. For petrol, for the engine, for all the amount of equipment, we actually had to get our own petrol station within the site as well on the complex. We had our own kitchen. Majority of the foreign workers will live on site, and everyone else had to basically drive back home. So I just wanted to show the amount of people that was involved on that project. Next slide. These pictures are not really clear, but the individual to the left, that's how a normal site induction will be every morning. Just literally saying to the laborers, this will be in Somali. And then the Chinese workers were basically the site managers. The labor workers were, majority were Somali, some of them were Ethiopian as well. But the health and safety lead will literally give an induction every morning and will tell them that the work that's going to happen and then the risks happen in normal site inductions. The picture towards the middle is just how important this project was and the amount of influence and the amount of, I guess, the amount of people that were involved globally. So the chaps in the high vis are the Ugandan consultants. And then we've got, so Somalia has its own ambassador, but then this individual who is, was the Somaliland ambassador to the UK, but now it's changed to a lady, which I don't know her name. And then we've got the lead of the FCDO, I guess the fund manager with the red tie. And then we've got leads of environment, and then we've got the country manager of trademark. And then we have the former ambassador of Somaliland to the UK, which is Ayan. And then you've got the British ambassador, which I cut half of her body, apologies, but her name is Kate Foster. and she is the ambassador of the UK to Somaliland. And then they would come every 3 months or so to check the site, and then just get updates to make sure that everything's going up to speed. So the UK was quite involved in this project. Next slide.